Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, Matt here with Duke's Models, and welcome to episode 12 of the P-40F build. Now, I'd hoped that episode 12 would be sort of the final wrap-up with installing the gear struts, unmasking the canopy, rigging the aerial line, that sort of thing. But it's not. And the reasons why are a few. So first of all, I haven't touched the P-40 in about 3 weeks. I was a good way through the dark side of the weathering when a big-ass 1/72nd scale U-9 U-boat landed on my doorstep, and I needed to divert from the P-40 to do a quick build review of that thing. So that took me away, and in that intervening time, I forgot where I was and kind of what I was doing on the P-40. And so I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and edit parts 10 and 11 and kind of catch up and figure out where I was and what I was thinking. And lo and behold, part 11, about half of it has no audio because the microphone died, and I didn't notice because the power indicator is facing away from me. Yay. So that's another bit of fun that's slowing me down, is having to go back and repair episode 11 and probably record some voiceover on top of it to clear things up and make it work. Of course, the audio would cut out on like the key weathering stages, right? But yeah, so that slowed me up for a while. And then I finally got back to working on the P-40F last night and spraying a bunch of little bullshit, like the ring and bead sights and some support struts for the landing gear and whatnot. And as part of that, I got these little drop tank sway braces sprayed. And that's when I ran into another big problem. So the tank itself, let me see if I can hold this in a way that will show it. The tank itself, if you just build it the way Trumpeter would have you build it, sits flush on that mount, which is no bueno, because then A, it just looks all wrong, B, the front of the tank actually hits the aircraft. Probably not a good thing for a little can full of fuel to be rubbing up against the bottom of your plane. And if you look at reference photos, it actually does have a gap between the mount and the tank itself, just like that. So I went in and took some various bits of evergreen and scratched up a really rudimentary mount to the underside that actually holds it a bit away and is more accurate to the real thing. Then I went to place these sway braces, and I noticed something really bad. They don't touch the tank. They are too short. Oh my. That's a problem. And these are the less awful of the sway brace options. The other ones that are actually more accurate because they have the little wire running off the top here into the belly of the aircraft. These have the pads at like this weird 90-degree angle thing that just comes nowhere close to matching, where the tank is actually sitting. I'm assuming these are intended to go with the bombs, or the bomb, and even then, they're garbage. Fuck them. So, dealing with these and realizing they are too short and not really having an obvious path to fixing them. I could cut them and extend them and put a little length in here, but that length would have to be dead on accurate, and it may be hard to see in the video, but these things are actually oval shaped. They are streamlined. So it's not a simple matter of cutting the base and the end off and sticking a, rod of metal in there, because I don't have any oval shaped rods, and I don't trust myself to really squeeze a rod into an oval shape that uniformly across its length, plus the fact that these things actually have a very slightly descending radius as they go from the wing to the tank. Yay. So, I opted to use this as a great opportunity to finally figure out Fusion 360 and design my own replacement sway braces. And it has been an adventure. I feel like I finally have a sense of how Fusion 360 thinks, which to me is always critical to learning a new software application. You know, something like Photoshop or Premiere Pro or, you know, basically all of Adobe's suite that I'm probably most well versed in. They each have their own logic. And so once you figure out those quirks and figure out what it wants and how it does things, it becomes a lot easier to do things and to learn new things. And every time I touched Fusion 360, nothing made sense. And so buckling down over the past few days and figuring out how to design replacement sway braces really helped me understand basically what it's looking for and what it expects out of me. And that helps me understand what I can expect out of it and how to work with it better. Thing is, we're talking really, really small parts here. I mean, I think this thing, like, the width is like a millimeter wide on the arm. And, you know, I think down at the base, it's like 1.5 millimeters. I mean, very, very little room. And I know that the 3D printer can print that. I don't know that the resin can withstand the wiring up and all that good stuff. So we'll just have to see. If that doesn't work, I'll find some other solution. I'm sure I'll figure something out. Maybe I can just print them solid and hope I get close enough on the measurements. But that is going to slow us up and basically mean that I can't do a whole lot down here for the moment. I can't install the gear struts. I can't install the gear doors because I need to be able to get in here and work. If I can't do that, I can't install the tail wheel. Blah, 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 blah. So, yeah. What are we going to do in episode 12 until I get these things printed? Okay, so I was feeling like I had to get something done. So I went ahead and installed the ring and bead sights. And I have to say, I'm pretty impressed with this master set. The trumpeter one is way overscaled, and both the ring and the bead are flat PE. With the master, the ring is still PE, but the bead is turned brass and works like a charm. Now, master does call for a 0.4 millimeter hole to be drilled. I actually went with a 0.5 millimeter bit just to be on the safe side for both breakage and to have myself that extra 0.1 millimeter room to play with. I was worried about the width of the PE of the ring sight actually fitting into that hole, but both it and the bead seem to go perfectly. So there are those. Now I just hope that I don't knock this off taking off the windscreen masking, which I probably will. Okay, so it's been a few days since I played with the P40, and my plan to replace the drop tank braces that go right here with 3D designed and printed ones hasn't quite gone according to plan. They are quite simply too small for me to print, at least at my current level of proficiency with 3D printing. They ended up as little sticks of goo at the bottom of the vat, stuck to the FEP sheet, and I'm still kind of working out my settings and my process for 3D printing in general, which has led to a whole other rabbit hole, which has kept me away from the P40. Fortunately, the Hasegawa braces, slightly modified. I basically cut off the brace that goes from the top of the strut into the fuselage right around here. They fit nicely, they work well, they are detailed enough. They're not anything amazing, but they're not anything horrible either. So I'm going to be using those. The thing is, I'm probably going to need to epoxy them in so they hold well, and so that I can remove the tank once they're placed, and place those little lines that need to go inside these holes. It's a dicey thing to do when they're wobbling around, so I want them nice and firm before I tackle that part of the job. Before I can do that, though, I need to have the tank in a better place. So right now it has been painted with AK Real Colors Neutral Gray, given a coat of hairspray, sprayed with a coat of neutral gray mixed with white gray, and very subtly chipped for a bit of a distressed finish. Which is all nice and good, but I want to go a little bit further. That's what we're going to do next. Okay, now this is where shit gets weird. Take a little bit of Guns Mr. Weathering color. This is their Sandy Wash. I know that John was using, I think it was one of the dust products from Ammo or AK or something like that. Similar-ish, like an enamel wash thing. Got that. I'm going to add a little bit of multi-gray to kind of deaden it. And I'm going to use the same dropper because, Then a little bit of Mr. Weathering Thinner, which I know I've talked about before. I am pretty sure is a blend of naphtha and odorless mineral spirits. But we want to thin things down a bit. Alright. Mix that up. Now we're going to find out if this works or not. Now, one stuff about this Guns Mr. Weathering color is it settles out fast, so you have to be about your business with it. Alright. So now I'm going to take this and literally just spray the tank. This stuff might be a bit thinner than the Ammo and AK dust, but I think that fits for... The idea here is a drop tank that has been sitting in a depot yard, probably gifted to the French because it's neutral gray, not azure. Okay. Let that dry just enough to work, and then we're going to come back and we're going to chip this. Fun times. Okay, this has had a few minutes to dry up. Now we come in here with a rat shit brush, get it a bit wet. Let's see how this goes. I hate when they're trying to do this shit with a toothpick because it wants to shift around so much. Like that. Stay put, Mr. Tank. I've actually dropped this thing off the toothpick probably a good 5 times now, and sent it to the floor twice, necessitating repaints. So this thing is truly a battered piece of equipment at this point. But I'm liking the effect here. Son of a bitch. It's got some interesting patterns going on though. I'm really liking this. I'll have to remember that and maybe use it on the P-38 as more of like a general thing too. Sweet. Right, a little bit more there up on the nose of this. I know, I'm sorry that it's hard to see. Alright, I think that's looking pretty solid. At least for that stage of weathering. Okay, so just to recap quickly what's gone into this. First layer of paint was AK Real Colors Neutral Gray 43. Now, I like this neutral gray better than my usual standby of MRP because the MRP neutral gray is just really dark. and that's kind of annoying to deal with. So this stuff is lighter in tone, seems more what I'm after, at least on this build. So first layer of that, then a couple coats of hairspray, then a mix of neutral gray and white gray. Let that dry up for several days while I fell down the 3D modeling rabbit hole. Came back with a layer of ammo heavy chipping effects, or maybe a couple layers, I don't really know. I was just spraying. Then mixed up some Mr. Weathering Color Sandy Wash with a little bit of multi-gray and some Guns Mr. Weathering Color Thinner. Sprayed that on with an airbrush too, chipped it, and now we've got this nice scuzzy looking tank, which will look quite nice, I think, with the azure that we've got on the underside. Nice bit of visual interest and have something different going on there. Okay, so I'm going to clean out the airbrush, and then I'm going to get this thing sealed up, and we can move on. So, looking at a couple reference photos of P-40s operating in North Africa, these tanks got pretty filthy. Not only from dust and whatnot from sitting around, but also from leaks from fuel fills and from just the aircraft itself being dirty and spraying a bunch of shit back in their direction. And it's a mix of two things, at least from what I'm seeing. You've got kind of streaking running down the sides, and you've got spatters along the top. And I'm assuming on the bottom too, from where the stuff sort of gathers. So let's start with the streaks. For this, I'm going to be using some oil brushers because they don't see enough love. And 3 varieties here: Starship Grime, which is basically the equivalent of Starship Filth, that sort of dirty gray color, Medium Brown, and everybody's favorite, Grime. Alright, so to start the process, basically going to take this and just dab a little bit up here along the top. No real rhyme or reason. Then I'm going to take my Aqualon Wisp. I love this brush, it doesn't get used enough. And basically just drag things down. I'm probably going to need to add some thinner to this, aren't I? Yep. Glad I'm doing this on a paper towel because this thing was to slide all over the place on me. So let's find a little bit of thinner. I'll stop that rotational bullshit. Decent starting point. Let's start adding some different tones into this thing. A little bit of medium brown. One thing I like about this wisp is it gives the random streaking effect very, very well. And because of that, you can go in and kind of refine it down as much as you want. Okay, and last, but certainly not least, Starship Filth. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to let that sit and dry up, and then we'll tackle the top. Alright, so while I wait for the drop tank to dry up a little bit so I can play more with it, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of speckling on the wheels. And for this I'm using more Mr. Weathering color. I'm just figuring I've already got the boundary between the sidewall and the contact patch pretty well covered, but you're unlikely to see that kind of build up without kicking some shit up elsewhere. Let's flip these around. We'll come back and do other colors too. Come on. As you can see, I've gone ahead and installed the little brake line cylinders there. Those are 3D printed connectors, and I've drilled out tiny little holes and put in some ultra wire to help mount the brake lines themselves when the time comes. Yeah, just considering the amount of shit kicked up on the underside of the wings, I think it would be disingenuous to not have some evidence of that playing on the wheels themselves, right? Let's go add a little bit of grayish brown too. Alright, so I've gone ahead and installed the mount for the tank to the fuselage itself. Now it is time to go ahead and deal with the epoxy for these braces. So I've mixed it up. Oh, maybe not. Alright. It's funny, you put these things in and out 500,000 times when you're doing the test fitting and everything. It comes time to do it for real, and your hands are all shaky. So, see what I mean? Jesus. Now, the reason that I'm using epoxy for this versus, say, super glue or regular glue is that it gives me time to go ahead and get all this stuff positioned the way that I want it. Maybe. Fucking hell. And when it sets, it will set nice and hard. So I can get in there, take the tank out, and mess with these things. So there we go. Those are installed. Now we're just going to wait for them to set up. I really want to get the gear struts installed, but I need to get this whole area flat coated before I can do that. So we're just going to sit here and wait a few minutes for these things to set up, and then I'm going to take the tank out and do a little bit more weathering along the bottom here, which I want to scuzz up more, and we will keep right along going. Actually, while I have the epoxy out, I'm going to go ahead and get the prop blades glued into the boss here. Thankfully, all the earlier work means that these things are pretty light lift at this point. They pretty much fit how they're going to fit. And so there we have it. One propeller. Awesome. All right, while I'm waiting for the tank braces to set up, it's time to go ahead and put down some ungloss. All right, while I'm waiting for the tank braces to fully set up, it's time to put down some ungloss. And I'm going to be using MRP's 127 Super Clear Matte Varnish, running through my PS267. Great thing about this stuff is it doesn't need much. Okay, there is an unglossed P-40. Now, I'm also going to get in here and spray the gear struts with matte, and I'm going to try to avoid the oleos. This will be fun. Cool, so there's one. There's two. All right, now that we've got the P-40 flat coated, we can go ahead and install the wingtip lights. And for this, I'm going to be using some Ammo Ultra Glue. Gives you a good amount of working time, but it dries much more firmly than you would think. So it's good for parts like this and other clear parts. Maybe, if this thing will fit. There we go. That's a pretty cool solution from them, that big, thick, clear piece that just seats right into the wing. It's a bit scary getting it in there, but it's in there. All right, over to this side. There we go. Ugh. So that one was a bit more of a pain in the ass, but it went in finally. Had to trim a little bit around the bottom of it just to make sure that it fit in the hole. But basically, that is the order of operations for all of the clear parts. So they go on the top of the wings, and there are some that go on the tail as well, just like that. But I don't think we need to see all of them to get the gist of how this works. Okay, so as you can probably tell from what you're seeing on the screen, I've gone ahead and unmasked the cockpit and pulled out the belt that's going to be hanging loose and all that kind of stuff. Need to give it a little bit of weathering love. Also installed over here the scallop window behind the cockpit bulkhead. And now I need to do the port side. And these things piss me off. They are not particularly well thought out, because you are literally gluing edge on with no frame, which is just not a cool thing to do. So again, we're using Ultra Glue. This is also tricky because there's not really a good position to get in here to place this. I mean, I guess the good news is it fits pretty well. It's got that going for it. But yeah, I much prefer the Hasegawa solution where you build up this center hump and then the outside windows are incorporated as a clear part along with the upper spine of the fuselage. And so you basically put that together, place it, and then mask off just the windows. To me, that's a much more elegant solution than what's going on here. But this isn't the Hasegawa kit. Alright, so I feel like I've been working towards this for like a week and a half now, but it's time to go ahead and install the tank brace braces, which are little bits of wire that go into these holes and connect up to the top area of the tank braces. And on the real P-40s, these things basically connected into the whole framework for the tank mount in general. But we're not going quite that far. So I've got some Ultra Gel CA on this pad, and what I'm doing is dipping the head of the wire into the CA, and then I'm going to insert it into the hole. Just like that. I probably should have done the front one first. Alas. I'm curious how loud this is, because that's the new compressor. It's a California Air Tools quiet compressor, and it's not that quiet. All right, so those are installed, looking fancy. And basically the tank just sits on there like so. I need to obviously position it a bit. And that's that. Nice. So this means I can now install the main gear struts. And the main gear struts are tight enough that they honestly do not really need any glue. They hold in just fine, which makes my life a lot easier. Okay, so we've got gear struts placed. I love that the wheels also don't really need gluing. They just, thanks to some careful drilling early on, are press fit onto these axles. Okay, so we're back, and if you're curious where I went, I needed to glue the tail wheel down, and it's a bit of a floppy connection, and I needed a sheet of glass to make sure that everything was sitting properly as I did it, so I just moved this over to the other bench. Now it is time to go ahead and connect these brake lines to the mount on the wheel, and I'm sorry there's really no good way to show this from this camera angle. But basically what I did is I took one of these little resin 3D printed coupler things, drilled a tiny hole through it, ran a tiny piece of ultra wire through it, and that will now connect to the fly tubing that I'm using as the brake lines. So for this I'm going to use some VMS Flexi CA. Just gonna get in here and apply a small amount. And I'm really hoping this doesn't like rip the mount off the wheel or any of that kind of bullshit, because I might lose it if that happens. Yay! One connected. Alright. That was only completely terrifying. I'll have to do a little bit of touch up on the brake line paint itself, but there you have it. Come on. There you have it. Excellente. Alright, so I'm going to get this other one done, and we'll pick back up. Okay, while I'm touching up the brake lines, now that they've been installed, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of paint to this fuel line that's coming off the drop tank into the fuselage. This is Vallejo gray-green. It's a nice dirty gray that doesn't look like other stuff. Which is perfect for our purposes. And if you notice the stupid fingerless gloves, it is like 34 outside right now. And the garage is outside. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and deal with repainting the brake lines where when I bent the vinyl, it decided to crack off the Vallejo that was on there. For this, I want something with a little bit finer of a tip. And with that, we are very, very close to being done. So what all remains? Well, I need to go in and add a little bit of weathering to the braces here and to these interior doors, which I didn't really get as much as I wanted to. I want to add a little bit of extra weathering to the bottom of the tank. I might do that once I install it. Then we need to install the pitot tube, and I need to flip this guy over. So pretty much the top side is done. I need to install the pitot tube over here. It's just kind of waiting until the very end. Coming around to this side, I need to install that little rudder to tail doohickey that fell off. It's over here. I need to deal with the harness, which is going to be some weathering and a little bit of kind of grunging up, wrinkling up, etc., and then gluing it down to the fuselage. I need to do the rigging from the antenna mast to the tail back here. And then lastly, I need to install the canopy right about there. Put the prop on the front, and I will officially be done with this thing. Okay, so moving on to the tail wheel doors. I've got them about as splayed open as they can be, and I discovered something funny. When you take this part, I believe it's J26, and you go to attach it to the two recesses in the doors, even as splayed out as they are, it just is too wide. So my solution for this is to go in and cut that piece and attach 1/2 to each of the doors, and go ahead and plop in a little bit of Flexi CA. Go ahead and attach the doors as you normally would, keeping them again splayed out because for some reason P40 doors, tail wheel doors, open really wide. I'm not quite sure what the explanation for that is, but they are, almost horizontal to the ground in terms of how far out they open. So put one in, put the other one in. Again with that J26 piece cut in half with a little bit removed from the center just to make sure that it'll all fit. Press the doors down, get them where they need to be, and looking pretty good. And go in with tweezers and just kind of make sure that things are aligned, kind of pinch the pieces together. And there you have it. Excellent. Okay, next it's time to install the tank. There's the hole I drilled for the fuel line. Just slide that in. Put the tank onto its mount. Then we have to jimmy it in a little bit, just kind of wiggle it around, get it down on the mount. seated. Come on. All right, there we go. And so yeah, that is now installed. The tank braces look nice. Tank looks nice. Everything is in happy working order. So much effort for such a tiny little result. Yay. All right, now to go ahead and apply a little bit of wash to this J26 piece, just to pick out the silver a little bit so it doesn't look so toy-like. This is just Starship filth heavily thinned into a wash. And here's some heavier Starship filth that we're going to use to beat up these braces a bit, because it looks weird that they're so clean compared to the rest of the aircraft around it. So just go in here with a thin brush, get the Starship filth placed. A little bit more. And I'm also reducing this with some thinner as well, just to get it spread around. Again, tide marks make a ton of sense here because we're talking about splashing and flying fluids that land on the paint and kind of stain it. So we want this to be messy intentionally. Add some to the front brace up here. This is one problem with installing the landing gear early, is working around it is a little bit of a pain in the ass. Not terrible. So we've got those done. Moving on to adding some more shit to the bottom of the tank. Again, my idea was this thing is like sitting in a supply depot. It's being used. It's sitting in a supply depot. It's being used. Fluids are spilling. Fluids are gathering along the bottom of the tank. It's being set in dust and dirt and crap. And so you get essentially this sort of a stain going. And after adding the Starship filth, I believe that is what this is, going in and kind of working it in, thinning it down, hitting it with the flat brush, and going back and pulling some of that back from the edges. And then restoring it a little bit in the center. Yay. And there is the nice and dirty underside of the tank. All right, moving on to the upper surfaces, we've got the dangling seatbelt harness. So it's pretty much the top of it's been glued in, and now I need to go ahead and treat it to a wash with very thinned down sepia. Just coming in here and letting the belt soak up all this lovely oil goodness, using it to pick out details and make it not look so albino-like. And it's tough in these angles because it's really reflecting the light from the overhead lights, making it look far more pasty than it is in real life. Now moving on to the aerials. So this is Infini Lycra thread that I have run through the forward mast and the little area on the back of the tail. And you can see there I've got two pieces of fly tubing I've cut out as insulators. And so basically getting those things threaded is a lot of fun, which is why it happened off camera. Now the next thing that I need to do is, I call it the Bolo Method. But basically I take the extra length of Lycra thread there, and I run it back through each of these pieces of tubing. So the forward one through the forward one, the back one through the back one. Here, let me go ahead and pull that back one back where it needs to be. So more back that way. Now this is a really, really tricky thing to do, so it's really hard to film. I kind of need to get my eyes close to it, and you don't want to see just video of the back of my head. So I'm going to pause, jump away, and go ahead and get those things routed through their insulators. Back in a second. All right, so I've got everything routed, everything nice and ready to go. And as you can see, I've gone ahead and rigged up this little clip from a Tamiya painting carousel on a piece of sanding sponge to hold it at essentially the right angle to keep everything nice and tight. I've already glued the front insulator right there, basically just with a little dab of CA, to hold the pieces of Lycra thread where they need to be. Now it's time to go ahead and do the same thing to the aft insulator. So for this, I'm using an airbrush needle and again some of that Flexi CA. Just get a little bit of CA on the needle and come in and dab it into the Lycra threading. Just like so. And we let that kind of flow into the insulator. We move the insulator back just a little bit to cover it again. Everything is nice and happy. And now it's time to let this set up for a little while. Okay, so this has had about 20 hours of sitting. Let's go ahead and carefully remove it. Look at that. Nice and taut. Now comes the fun joy of cutting. Oh, fuck. Huh. That's a good one. All right, guess we're applying more CA and doing more letting it sit. Brilliant. This part is frustrating. Okay, let's go ahead and try cutting some of these things. Frustrating thing here is that my scissors, none of them are particularly sharp anymore. I haven't done this in a while. So that's fucking useless. There we go, that's one. I'm going to give the other one a few minutes because I have a feeling that if I try to do that to it right now, it'll snap. Come on. Oh, that'll have to do. So, there's the aerial line. Now let's get this fucker painted up. Okay, it's cold enough out that the paint needs to heat up. So I am going to go ahead and start gluing the harness to the fuselage. This is the fun of late in the game building, is just waiting for shit to set up on you. Alright, I think that's going to hold. We should probably give it a minute though. And the idea is to, once I have this kind of glued in up here, to kind of drape this part further back. I don't want to touch it now because I don't want to spring that loose. So let that really set up for a few minutes and then do the fun things. Next up, how about we go ahead and get the Pitot tube installed so I can see if I can break it off late in the build. So I already broke it once. Alright, so to paint the aerial, I've mixed up some ammo steel, some rubber and tires, which didn't take it as dark as I wanted it to, and so I added some Vallejo black. The result is a nice dark metallic color that will be very difficult to see if we're actually getting onto the rigging wire or not. Alright, let's go ahead and get these insulators painted. And for this I'm going to be using some Vallejo off-white. There are a few pictures where you can kind of make out the color of these things, and they're definitely white. But I don't want to go pure white because pure white is too loud. Good Lord, I gotta be able to find a way to get closer to these things. I'm trying to find an angle where I can work with my hand and still get this thing in focus and show you what's happening. Okay, insulators are painted. Alright, this is going to be tricky. It came out a bit more of an angle than I was hoping for, so we're definitely going to have to curve our shot a little tiny bit. Because I want this thing to be up under that part. Shit. Guess who broke the Pitot tube? Alright, last damn thing. The problem with these master Pitot tubes is the resin into the metal tube is fantastic unless you touch it and then it snaps. And so the lightest brush will absolutely destroy it, which is problematic. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes before I install it, and then we will be done with the P40, unless I snap it again. Okay, so the Pitot tube is back in. It may not be exactly aligned correctly, but I am scared to touch it at this point for fear of breaking something, so it is going to be as good as it's going to get. And now we have one more little thing to do. Ta-da! And with that, the long journey to the P-40F is finished. This one is ready for its photo session. And then some fun rest in the display cabinet. So that wraps up whatever episode this is, and I'll be back for one more, kind of doing a wrap-up of the whole build, impressions of the kit, summary of sort of what I did and what worked and what didn't work. So thanks for sticking with this whole thing, and back for one more episode. Check you later.